down. Okay. And I'm going to mute myself because I'm getting all the notification things, and I don't know if you can hear them when everybody's joining. So, Caleb, you can take it away for right now.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining us again. If this is your first time at one of our volunteer management think tanks, absolutely welcome. We want to keep this growing and be a really helpful resource for volunteer coordinators and managers throughout RMHCs throughout the country. And it's really cool, the community that we've built so far. Thank you for everyone returning. I see lots of familiar faces. As always, we are going to start with introductions. So just really briefly, if everyone doesn't mind kind of popcorning around, I can start, and then we'll each just call on one person that hasn't gone yet. But just say your name, what chapter you are from, and let's do how long you've been working at RMHC, your respective chapter. So hi, everyone. My name is Dylan. Along with Stephanie and Jillian, we are splitting hosting the think tank this year, as we did last year. Super exciting. And I'm from the Tampa Bay chapter. I've been here for just over 2 years. And I will call on Leilani.
Hi, thank you, Dylan. My name's Leilani Kitchings, and I'm the Director of House Operations for the Temple, Texas Ronald McDonald House Charities, and I have been here 13 years now. Woo! I will call on Molly.
Hi, everyone. I'm Molly. I'm from the Danville, Pennsylvania chapter. I've been here for about a little over a year and a half, and I am the assistant manager and volunteer coordinator. And I'll go ahead and call on Sophia.
Hello, I'm Sophia Melgar. Parlini was my maiden name that you see there, so I'm gonna have to figure out how to change that. Sorry, I was a little bit late. What are we sharing?
We're just sharing our name, what chapter we work at, and how long we've been at RMHC. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks, Dylan. Thanks for having me. So I'm Sophia Melgar. I work with the Madison chapter, Madison, Wisconsin chapter, and I serve as the volunteer and operations manager. And I've had that role for the past almost 2 years now.
Great. And if you don't mind calling on someone else that hasn't gone yet.
I'm sorry, I don't know who hasn't gone yet then. Could you pick someone for me?
Yeah,
Dylan?
you're good. Let's see who's on my screen. Harriet, would you mind sharing?
Of course. So my name is Harriet Tambini. I am the volunteer manager at our Jacksonville, Florida house, and I have been with our team. It'll be a year in March. And I will go ahead and toss it to Caleb.
Hi, everybody. This is my first meeting. Very happy to be here. My name is Caleb Gossett. I'm the volunteer services manager at the Piedmont Triad chapter. So it's located in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And I've been here in this role for 3 years. And I will pass it off to Adelaide.
Hi, everyone. My name is Adelaide. I am the community and volunteer engagement manager for Ronald McDonald House of Greater Washington, D.C. I started this position in August, but I was a volunteer previously for Kansas City, and then I was house operations for DC, and now I'm in this position. I'm really excited to be here, especially because I just found out that my boss is leaving, so I'm a one-woman show for our chapter right now, so I could really use all the support. And I just hopped on, so I truly have no idea who has not gone.
No worries. We'll jump it to Sotrika.
Hey, everybody. I'm a little sick, so I do apologize if I'm not loud enough. This is my first meeting, so I really thank you for having me. I'm Sotrika. I'm the volunteer recruitment coordinator at the Ronald McDonald House in New York City. I've been with the house for about 2 years. I believe Lindsay joined the last meeting, but she couldn't join this time. So yeah. And sorry, it just says 11 others. It doesn't have a specific name for me to call on somebody.
No worries. Let's move it to Alex. Great to see so many new faces. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
I'm Alex Hedges. I'm the volunteer manager coordinator at the Ronald McDonald House, Missouri, in Columbia, Missouri. I have been with Ronald McDonald House organization since March of last year, so almost a year. And I will go ahead and pass it to Ciara.
Yeah, hi, I'm Sierra Kriegler. I'm the Community Engagement Manager for Chicagoland in Northwest Indiana. And I've been here just about a year. February will be a year. I also don't know. It looks like Allie. I'll pass it to you.
No worries if Allie's not here. We'll jump to Iris. Are you on?
Muted. There we go. Hi, my name is Iris Love. I am the volunteer coordinator at the Ronald McDonald House in Cincinnati, and I've been in this position for about 9 months. So I'll pass it to Melissa.
So I'm Melissa Jackson. I have also at the Ronald McDonald House of Greater Cincinnati. Iris and I work together, and I have been at the house for over 10 years, over 10 years. I also can't see who the 12 others are, so if you could.
We can jump to Katie.
Great.
See, there are two, so whoever jumps in first.
Hi, I'm Katie. I'm the volunteer coordinator at the Ronald McDonald House of Kentuckiana in Louisville, Kentucky. And I've been here it'll be a year in June. And I will call on Katie Thomas.
Sorry, I don't have camera right now. We're driving back from a community event, but we got a team here from Ronald McDonald House Charities Central Florida. But yeah, I've been on the team for almost 3 years now. We also have Casey here, who's been on the team for over 8 years. And then we have Meredith, who just joined us in November. Wow. And then we have our intern Julia with us as well. So you got a little crew here, but we'll be jumping on with camera when we're back at one of the houses soon. Oh, and then I need to pass it on to, is there anyone who hasn't gone yet? I know we've hit a lot of people already.
Yeah, anyone that hasn't gone, feel free to jump in.
I can go. I actually said I wouldn't have audio because I was inside the library, but I've moved out to my car. My name is Jana Gomer. I'm with Ron McDonald's Charities of Kentuckiana. Katie and I work together. I'm the Director of Programs and Volunteers. I've been with our house for 25 years. I've held several different titles there in house operations, family services, facilities, and most recently in this role. However, I've always had experience working with our volunteers. So let's see. Yeah, and if you can call on someone else or if someone can speak up.
Yeah, and I'm kind of losing track.
How are you all? I'm a little
Yeah.
late for the meeting. How are you all doing today?
Hi, Anthony. Thanks for being here.
Oh, yes. I'm Anthony. I'm here at the Ronald McDonald House of Columbia, South Carolina. I'm the volunteer coordinator here. Been serving as a volunteer coordinator since maybe the third quarter of 2024. It's been a pleasure so far. Yeah, I'm looking forward to all of the doors that are starting to open. The community engagement is just, man, it's just to see everyone else's passion, to give back to the community or to help the families that are, maybe going through a difficult time in their life. It's amazing. That's actually what keeps me coming in every day, just to see the miracles that, God is actually putting in front of my face, to see how the community actually comes together and supports, families that need that type of help. So, and it's great to be here with you all today. So happy Friday, you all.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. I totally agree. I brag to people all the time about working at Ronald McDonald House and how every day I get to have so many great interactions with awesome people in our community, from the families to all the donors that generously support us to everyone else that's a team member. And that's a big part of why this group brings me so much joy. And I've really been looking forward to jumping into these think tanks again. Vanessa, were you going to introduce yourself, and then anyone else that hasn't yet?
Yeah, thanks, Dylan. My name is Vanessa Stoller, and I'm the volunteer manager for the Ronald McDonald House of Denver. And I've been here 2 years, and I worked at another chapter managing volunteers for about 4 years previously.
Great. Sorry, my cat is being a gremlin right now. Has anyone else not introduced themselves that hopped on and hasn't yet? We're just saying name, what chapter you're in, and how long you've been here.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lori Ann Miller. I'm manage volunteers at the Ronald McDonald House in Philadelphia, and I've been here for about 15 years.
I can go ahead next. My name is Madeline Hernandez. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator at the Ronald McDonald House in Pasadena, California, so part of the Southern California chapter. And I'm going on 2 months, so very new, but happy to be here.
And then Stephanie, I know you haven't introduced yourself yet, if you don't mind.
It's true. I don't mind. I feel like we're missing one more person, but I figure while I'm already introducing myself, I'm going to do a couple of announcements so that then we can just start with our agenda. So I'm Stephanie Meredith. I am with RMHC Idaho here in Boise, where it is frigid. And so it's so wonderful to see so many of you guys here with us in the new year. Shout out, actually, I'm so excited that Lorianne is here because Lorianne, I don't know if you remember, we talked like 3 years ago when I first was in my position, and I was trying to get my feet under me, and I called you about a random question. And honestly, that conversation and your generosity to me, I think, was one of the reasons that I started thinking like there could be more community and there could be more conversation. So huge thanks to you, Lorianne. You have been formative in me growing. So I love having the opportunity to thank you in a group setting.
Thank you.
Yes, my pleasure. So yes, I love that we have this opportunity to learn from one another and to share with one another. It's one of the things that is a joy of my year every year now that we're going into year 4. I think, if memory serves, which is crazy. I'm so happy for us all and all that we've grown in and all that we have ahead of us because of one another. So a couple of housekeeping things. One, of course, we have transitioned to more using Gmail-based things or Google-based products. And there's still some missing pieces that I'm figuring out with the help of Dylan and Jillian, but would love to have a little bit of feedback from you guys on that. For one thing, you may have noticed that I had a little bit of hiccup in sending out invites. Some of you, I think, were invited once, some of you twice. Sorry about that. I'll do better for the future. Yes, now I know the process for that. So thanks for your patience with me as I navigate a new platform. Another thing that I wanted to say is that we still don't have a good platform for our think tank notes that we've landed on other than, and I'm hoping that this is okay. So I'm just soliciting your feedback, just email me. But I think that we'll be able to do it where we share Google Drive and that it doesn't matter which email address, but I can make it so that you can view when you join the group, that you can view the folder that has notes and that you can be editors and add your own thoughts, similar to our OneDrive OneNote notebook that we've been using. But my goal is that it's a repository of information, really our goal, it's not only mine. Our goal is that it's a repository of information for us all, and that you can go back and refer to those things, but you can also add in an ongoing way. And then along with that, we're wondering if there's, within Google Spaces, there is a capacity to have throw up a question in the moment and other people respond. The limitation we've discovered so far is that you do have to have a Gmail account. So if you don't, that would be really good information for me so we know to keep looking. But if everybody has Gmail, then we could use that feature as well. And just like, I'm having a question, what do you guys think about it? I know we have radar for that, but sometimes, I don't know about you guys, but I feel like I have things that are related to conversations I've had here in the think tank that I think it's, makes sense to follow up on in that space. So, or even maybe it's not necessarily. And I'm just looking for feedback basically from you guys on that front. And then the last thing I wanted to thank you is so many of you are here because someone else told me that you wanted to be here. So just a reminder to keep on inviting. That's how we get to grow and who's here. And I'm so excited that you all are here with us today. So with that, I think that's all my housekeeping stuff. I did notice that Allie had sent in a comment that she is with us and she's from the Chicagoland in Northwest Indiana. So thank you for being here, Allie. We're glad to have you. All right, Dylan, I think that's you.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie. And yeah, for the millionth time, thank you everyone for being here. So since there are so many new faces, I wanted to just kind of quickly describe how these calls work. Because we are going on year 4, which is exciting. This really is a think tank rather than a meeting. So there's not all the most structure in the world. I'm here hosting just to kind of delegate and make sure that the conversation is moving forward, but that the goal really is that this is a conversation. We have over 20 incredible volunteer managers here from all over the country that all have different experiences. Because one of the most beautiful things about the Ronald McDonald House system is how different each of our chapters are based on the needs of our hospitals and our families and our geography, but how we're really united by the same mission of caring for families and for children. So, of course, that falls onto our hands as volunteer coordinators to make sure that we're bringing the best people in our community in to be interacting with our families and helping our fellow staff members to keep the house running smoothly. So essentially, we're just going to unmute ourselves whenever someone stops speaking if you have something to respond with. So I'm not going to be calling on people or anything like that. Feel free to just unmute, and if there are awkward little times where we're talking over each other, then I can call on someone to go first. But essentially, this is just a platform for all of us to brainstorm about ideas about our topic and to share things that have worked for us in the past that we've tried, maybe share things that we tried that weren't as successful. And since there are so many of us here, just really be able to influence each other and benefit from stealing each other's ideas, because why reinvent the wheel when a lot of us have tried different techniques and things and found what works. So, of course, starting the year, this day's topic is on recruitment logistics. This is, of course, very important for getting new volunteers into our houses. And I was saying a little bit before we started about how this time of year tends to be a little busier, at least for us down here in Tampa, for recruitment, just because lots of people have New Year's resolutions to get out in the community more after the holidays. People are feeling generous, and this is just a great time to be getting out in front of the community and recruiting people to our awesome cause. So our first little topic is going to be the first step in recruiting, which is how we get the word out to people. And at least for us down in Tampa, one of the most successful ways for recruiting volunteers has always been our outreach opportunities and our tabling events at different community events that are going on. So I'm going to pass the mic off to anyone that has any thoughts or experiences on kind of the success rate on those kind of tabling outreach events.
I have a question before we start. If you do find those successful, how do you track the success of those? Because a lot of times you're talking to a wide group of people. I'd love to know if you're somehow tracking and saying this is the outcome from us going to this particular table and event.
Yeah, that's a great question. Honestly, for us right now, it isn't the most formal in the world. We have little clipboards and sign-up sheets that we take to each event that's like labeled with what the event is and the date, and we can track people's information that way. And then when we're putting them into our volunteer system, can kind of just put into the notes where their kind of first touch point was. That's also based on once we start meeting with volunteers during the interview, we always want to know how they heard about us, whether it was word of mouth, or if they have a family friend that stayed at a Ronald McDonald House or something like that. So not the most formal tracking method in the world. I'd love to hear if any other chapters have found better ways to kind of track those touch points. And if not, that's okay. I will share, just get the ball rolling with a really positive experience that we had really recently. Actually, just earlier this week on Tuesday, we had an outreach event at University of South Florida, their St. Petersburg campus, which is literally like a 2-block distance away from our largest Ronald McDonald House down here. So it's a great source of volunteers for us, for all those students that are getting volunteer hours for classes and their student groups. So we had one of our volunteers actually go out to their semesterly tabling event where lots of different organizations in the community get a platform in front of the students, and they get to just walk around through the different tables and learn more. And at least for us, utilizing our volunteers for all of these outreach events has really been a game changer that we just started taking advantage of kind of in the last year or two. In the meantime, it was me and my 2 team members on our volunteer services team that were spending a lot of our time each week going out to different school events and corporate events and community fundraisers and things like that. And while it's a great use of our time, we've been able to really expand how much we're able to get out in front of the community by utilizing our, what we call our ambassador volunteers, who are the ones that are really spokespeople for Ronald McDonald House, going out to check presentations and company dinners and things like that, and presenting on all the things we do. So that's really been transformative for our tabling. I wonder if has anyone else kind of utilized volunteers in that way for volunteer recruitment, because we found that when trying to get new volunteers, who can kind of sell the pitch better than a current volunteer?
We haven't gotten to the point where we're utilizing volunteers as ambassadors, but I would really like to get to that point, and it is something that I'm looking from the student perspective as well. Like, as far as like high school students, a lot of those students don't meet the age requirement to be in the house. But I would love to know more about like what your requirements or orientation or training for those ambassadors are. And then like how you decide what information that they're kind of allowed to project.
Yeah, we do have a special training document for our ambassadors. We kind of pitch it to volunteers during their training. So after they've already kind of started the onboarding process and we're going through teaching them how to volunteer in the house, we always mention that those outreach opportunities are an option. So I can actually put later in our OneNote, I'll put that training document because it's not too long. It's just a few paragraphs kind of explaining the job description and what opportunities there are for those volunteers. And we also have a specific script for these offsite events that are just kind of our brief like elevator pitch of the history of Ronald McDonald House and our chapter and kind of the mission and all of that good stuff. So I can share those definitely.
I would also like to make that kind of a more formal opportunity for some of our volunteers too. But right now it's just been a handful of events. So I've kind of just cherry picked volunteers that I know have either expressed an interest in doing that kind of stuff or who I think would be a good fit depending on the event. And then sometimes we'll make like a custom flyer for it depending on what the audience is. But I'm curious, I guess, to know with these tabling events for anyone who's going, are you seeking out and asking for the opportunity to come on site somewhere, or are these all just community groups who are reaching out saying they have an event and inviting you? I'm kind of curious how that's working.
I can say that I've put our profile on Handshake, and I get lots through the university. We've got several schools here in Columbia, and I get invites all the time. And after signing up for one, you tend to get the flow of others that come through to the point where I'm turning down some tabling events because I'm kind of trying to diversify. Like School of Health Science here is really great. In fact, I'm planning on using an volunteer/intern that will be coming in this year to do just that at the next health science fair that she'll be running that table. That's the hopes for it. But yeah, just getting Handshake's a good one. And I think just reaching out to certain volunteer or like retirement association here in Columbia is a good one as well. They always send an email out, and just the city of Columbia, other volunteer avenues in our town have been beneficial for those events, and state employees. All kinds of websites that you can search and kind of, once you look and get yourself involved in those events, they kind of tend to flow in, and your mailbox fills with lots of applications.
Alex, I'm curious, when you posted on Handshake, did you put anything in there to indicate that you'd be open to that?
No, so I posted just as like I have on our own website for, well, our marketing director has done it. We've collaborated on just posting the volunteer job. And because we're in Handshake, university reaches out to us as a non-for-profit. Because most of these events at the like career fairs, business fairs, showcases, they always have a non-for-profit table section where the price for admission is half. And a lot of the times you can ask, I mean, we're on a budget and we like to direct all of our funds towards the families. So if we could come and recruit volunteers at no cost, we would love to do that. And most of the time, having that conversation opens it up to a free ticket into those events.
I'm curious what you guys' experience is like. Like, do you guys have a lot of like success at tabling events? I feel like we've struggled a little bit with actually getting like volunteers who like move forward with us after an event. Even if we have like a sign up sheet out, like they'll sign up on it, we'll reach out to everyone on the list, and then we'll hear back from like nobody. So I'm just curious if anyone has had a lot of success getting volunteers from tabling events, or if they have like, if you have had success, like if you had any like successful methods you've used. I'll say we've started using, like Dylan was mentioning, we've started using ambassador volunteers a lot more, which has helped just in terms of like staff time and having volunteers be able to connect more with other volunteers. But I still feel like we struggle a little bit with getting like an actual like payoff from the events.
I'll share a example of it working out, and trust me, there's been multiple times of it having zero fruition, and that's just a reality. But one that really worked out, and maybe it's worth thinking about, and I haven't yet, why, how can we just do ones more like this? But the way it worked out was there's a local, Winston-Salem is, was tobacco country. So there's a huge tobacco company here, RJ Reynolds. And so they have a massive amount of staff, a huge building here. And so they did a community engagement volunteer fair for their employees. And we're talking a huge pool of people. So we went, we set up a table, and it was not very well attended. Like, hardly anyone came by, and so your thoughts are that was a waste of time, whatever. Well, what they did is because we went to the fair, we were included in their push out of, hey, staff, we want to see y'all as teams giving back more in the community. Here's the list of where you should go do that. Because we were there, we were on that list. So from that, we did a luminary event. I think maybe 75 of my 150 volunteers were from Reynolds, literally from teams coming out. So it was hugely successful. So I don't know if it's trying to find places where, hey, if we go, are we now on your list when you push out to your company for, engagement? But anyway, that was our experience. And again, I've had plenty that didn't work, but I'm just sharing one that worked out.
Yeah, Katie, I would say I recently got to go to, we're talking about diversifying like our pool. I got to go to a Sickle Cell Association Christmas situation. So they had a few tables, and honestly, the most impactful part of that event was talking with the other people that were tabling, because a lot of times those community members know other inns or they host their own tabling events, and so that opens up the pool. And then from there you almost get like the secondary success, kind of like Caleb's talking about, where since they've now posted, hey, like got to meet Ronald McDonald House Charities from DC today, think we should be utilizing them more. It's the same with just even hospital partners. Like they, a lot of our area, they didn't realize that sickle cell patients are people that we serve as well. And so that was like a great avenue for opening up that conversation to then go table at more of their stuff.
I'll just agree with Adelaide that when we go to tabling events here in Madison, oftentimes it is part of the college, UW-Madison. And so to Caleb's point, they also send out something when we attend those to the students, and that's how we get most of our engagement is afterwards, their follow-up, rather than students stopping by the table at the actual tabling event. But what Adelaide said, I think, is another reason why we really prioritize going to those tabling events, because we have met so many other community partners in the Madison area by meeting them at those events. And so not always super successful with, and we don't track it formally either, but not always super successful with how many recurring volunteers we get to our program from those, but it always is really successful with building those relationships with other community partners.
I would agree that I haven't had a lot of success with recurring individuals coming, which we have. Some of you heard me talk at length, right? We have our core volunteers, which I think pretty much everybody has that. And then we have community volunteers, and that makes up the bulk of our volunteer population. We have about 40 people who are core volunteers with our chapter. And I just ran the numbers, and we had close to 3,300 unique people who volunteered. So most of those were not recurring, right? Most of those came 1, 2, 3 times. But that still filled almost 7,000 shifts over the course of the year, right? So I've learned to kind of shift my thinking that like success for me isn't always getting a recurring volunteer, but it's having people who will come in, and because it's I think the long-term effect for me is that I'll have someone come one time and they tell their family or their friends, I really enjoyed going, and then a different corporate group wants to come. So I think that once I shifted my perspective on what that would look like, I felt that it's more successful, but it's the long game for me that I end up feeling the success about, because yeah, I'm trying to think of, from my last 3 tabling events, I don't think I've had anybody sign up independently from any of them. But I've made new community connections, and I've had corporate groups come as a result. So yeah.
Here in Philadelphia, we've had good success with tabling at welcome weeks at the local universities. Those students are really eager to find out how they can get involved with the local community, especially if they're not from Philadelphia. And we're walking distance, from their campus. So many of them have signed up to help out in our food services program, which is an attraction for hungry college students as well, most likely. But they help out at the front desk and in other areas like our fun zone or playroom also. And then we've also made sure to get added to any type of a civic engagement website or portal that the universities offer, which is a great tool not only to attract students, but also professional staff members who we need for, some of our more sensitive roles, like in our family rooms at the hospitals. And that's been super successful. We have been using our volunteer application to track how folks have heard about RMHC Philly. And that allows us to just generate reports as needed to see, where we're making traction. And we just keep adding to the different categories of, have you heard about us through a billboard or through tabling or, some other resource. So that's been working for us quite well.
I've heard a lot of people mention universities, which is awesome. And I also am aware that not every RMHC is located in a college town. So just another idea that we've taken advantage of is we have a really big farmers market in Madison. And so we oftentimes get those requests to be at tabling events from the organization, but we actually reached out to the farmers market in Madison to do a tabling event for them. It's really well attended, and so they did let us go, and we will be able to kind of spread some awareness and ask for volunteer help there. So just another idea. It doesn't have to be just at colleges, but maybe there's another thing in your city, kind of like a big farmers market.
So another part of on the agenda, if you see, is that this section wasn't just about tabling events, but kind of just outreach in general. At least for us, our volunteer services team is pretty closely linked with all of our community engagement. So we also run a lot of our outreach opportunities as far as when JP Morgan Chase emails us and says that they want to put together a big donation drive and have a volunteer event at their office that we come out to and speak on. And it hasn't been super often. Again, like with tabling, most of those organizations are happy to have us on site for a day and then wait until their next donation drive opportunity, or maybe they come on site as a group to make a meal. So we haven't had as much success finding individual volunteers from those kind of corporate outreach events, but it has happened. One of our incredible volunteers, who actually is an ambassador now as well, had an experience with Ronald McDonald House when she was young, and then was kind of reminded of that when we went to speak at Raymond James a couple of months ago, and has been one of our awesome like rock star volunteers since she joined. So curious if anyone has had kind of success stories or lessons learned from some of those other kind of outreach opportunities.
So we actually don't utilize our volunteers for outreach opportunities anymore. We did for many years, and we may again. But what we were finding out is that sometimes our volunteers were giving inaccurate information. So it was maybe things about the house that used to be true, but we have since made changes and they're no longer true. A lot of our, we called them Speakers Bureau volunteers at the time, were volunteers who'd been with the house for a long time, so 10, 15, 20 years. So they know the house really well. But, you know, as you all know, the rules often change of what families can do and what they can't do, and what the things that they can bring into the house. And we were finding out that sometimes our Speakers Bureau volunteers were giving information that was no longer true. So one piece of advice I would definitely suggest is, if you're using volunteers, make sure they're being trained and updated regularly, and not just once when they first start. Yeah.
I would 100% agree. We have ambassadors, and they are able to go out to community events and do tabling, or, you know, I would be comfortable with them going to many corporate groups and speak on my behalf. But one of the reasons that I am is because we do a training, and we have a slideshow that we use that kind of keeps them on track and gives them talking points. And since I'm the one who creates it, then if there's updates, then they're accountable to present what's on the slideshow, and that has made it a little bit more effective. So a lot of times, if there is a corporate presentation, like Dylan was just talking about, you know, we can ask in advance, can we show some slides? And since you're not going to be at the house, we want you to see what your impact does and where it is. And then it just gives me that inroad for that. And so since they're familiar with that slideshow, it does help even if they're going without it. Plus, I also am a big believer in handouts. Not that we want to use all the paper in the world, but even a quarter sheet can do a lot, and gives them good talking points. So those have helped me to have success there.
totally agree with everything that you just said, Stephanie. That the handouts are really helpful. We have been using the heck out of QR codes ever since coming out of COVID. Really helpful to just have that QR code to your website or straight to your volunteer application so that people can take a look at it, as well as obviously donation pages and lists of in-kind wish lists. All of those are just helpful ways, even if 90% of people you hand them out to are probably going to take a look and say, oh, that's really nice, good charity, and then put it down. The people that do end up elevating in that way are always helpful. And it doesn't always mean that they're going to be recurring volunteers. But of course, I think the outreach opportunities are helpful just to make sure that we're out in the community being active, whether it's on our college campuses or with different corporate groups that are looking to fulfill their CSR and get us in front of them and get their employees excited about helping. I did kind of briefly mention in that the QR code link straight to volunteer applications. So I'll use that as a weak segue into our next topic, which is kind of the next step of the process. We kind of established that for most of us, these outreach and tabling events aren't the most effective way that we're getting new volunteers. So I don't know about all of you guys, but at least for us, we're fortunate that most of our great volunteers come to us. A lot of people who really have the time in their schedule and the commitment to come in and volunteer on a regular weekly basis are people that are going to be going out seeking those opportunities. So most, I would say probably 95% of our applications come from people that say they were checking out our website or they have a friend who also volunteers and have convinced them. So once those people know about us, the first thing that many of them do is going to be fill out a volunteer application. So of course, I'm sure all of our volunteer applications look very similar in a lot of ways and all have very specific details and differences. So I'm kind of curious, I'm going to start off with the question, how often are you guys taking a look at your volunteer applications and kind of updating the different fields on there? I ask a little bit because of some guilt on our ends that it has been, I don't think we've got to it last year. So it's been 2 years since we've updated our volunteer application info. We are getting a new volunteer database very soon, which is going to be super exciting and allow us to do so much more, which means we're going to be revamping that volunteer application from the ground up. But yeah, curious if anyone is better than us.
Maybe along with that, if I can add another question, Dylan, is what do you, besides contact information, I'm going to assume we all want that, right? Address, phone number, email. What other things do you put on that? Because that might then guide how often you feel like you need to look back in it. So that might be helpful.
I think for us, for New York City, what's really important is knowing who they work for. We've actually gotten a lot of companies come in and help out, BlackRock being one of them. We go to them and they have 300 people that are there to help us out. We actually have one in a week. So that's a really important piece of information. A lot of our volunteers don't know that their company is willing to match their hours, or they're willing to donate an X amount if they volunteer for X amount of hours per month. So I think that's one really important question that we ask all of our volunteers and just kind of honestly bother them about. We're like, hey, I know you work at Bloomberg. Bloomberg is a big, is there something that we could do with you guys? And then we've actually had a lot of volunteers. We recruited volunteers that way as well. But yeah.
I'm sure this is one that's probably on most of your guys' volunteer applications, but for us, it's especially important to ask if applicants speak any languages fluently other than English. Particularly for us, we get a lot of international families from Central and South America, and even lots of our local families are mostly Spanish speaking. So it's really helpful when we have a bilingual Spanish speaker at the desk who's able to just instantly connect and talk with families rather than have to go and get our little translator phone or pull out Google Translate on our volunteer iPad or find a staff member.
I can kind of jump in. So we don't really at our house do tabling events. So that is a question that we have on our application, asking how they found out about volunteering opportunities. So trying to see if it is a staff member or past experience with the Ronald McDonald House. But something else I'm really trying to work on this year is finding out their interest or what their talents might be, whether it be they play a musical instrument or they're really passionate about gardening. Because I think we're kind of, our house in particular is missing the mark there. We had our big golf gala back in October and we really needed a photographer. And one of our development managers asked me if any of our volunteers, what's a photographer? And I didn't know. I haven't been doing a very good job of keeping track of that. So that's something I think I'm going to need to either figure out a way to track that or update our volunteer application to reflect that, or whether that's part of the orientation process where they kind of note that. But I do want to capture that information.
We did not have we started from scratch at the beginning of 2024. So when I came in, we didn't even have a volunteer database up and running. And so I was lucky in that it kind of gave me free rein to start from scratch. One of the things, Harriet, that I think works out really well for specific interests without it being something that they have to sit there and think about is I just have a question on the application that says tell us a little bit about yourself, what your interests are, what you like. And people actually write so much more than if they were to just click a couple things. It also gives me free rein since I oversee both houses. I'm rarely at both houses. And so I can send a little profile of each volunteer for their first shift to the house. That way they have, this volunteer, some fun information about them, a quick connecting point, and then why specifically they have found interest in RMHCDC. We have so many nonprofits in our area. We're so saturated that it's always kind of an interesting conversation to see why did you choose volunteering here versus somewhere else? And that can really be a deeper connecting point that then you point them to staff that they can connect with. So I would say having a more free question. We used to have it where it was select what some of your interests are and then you listed it, and it just ended up being too confining. So that would be my recommendation.
Thank you. That's great.
Those are all really, really good points. And I love the question about other languages. That's something that people have told us, but we've never specifically asked for. So I'm sure there's a lot more people than we know. I also have not changed the application or reviewed the application on a regular basis. We use Volgistics though. And about a year or two ago, they did a huge revamp of everything. And we had to redo our application. We added pronouns, what they wanted their pronouns to be. Nicknames also. There's so many volunteers who, they put their legal name, but they go by something different. We also asked for t-shirt size. So that way, when it's appreciation event or we have swag, instead of asking everyone we already know. And then we put emergency contacts as well. But yeah, it's hard to kind of stay on top of it, especially if it's working. Then you just kind of forget about it.
I do have a quick question. Do you guys put the volunteer requirements on the application? For example, we have a 1-year requirement 3 times a month. And then do you reach out to those people that say they cannot meet those requirements?
I usually will. I do put it on the application as well as the website. And if they say that they can't do that, then I will respond, but I'll refer them to, meals or activities or kind of more one-time opportunities. But I do try to respond to everyone, regardless of if they can complete all the requirements.
Thank you.
I want to share because we have 2 applications, one that everybody fills out, every single volunteer, whether they come for 2 hours one time, or if they're going to be recurring, we want the same information for them. And that is how, because we use Volunteer Local as our database, that's how we can assign somebody to a shift and track their hours, clock them in and out. So we need to collect something about everybody. So that's most of the things that you guys have mentioned would go there. But then we also have, as I mentioned, core volunteers. And for them, I do a lot more, right? So that's when I ask them about hobbies, talents, things that they want to use. They have more flexibility because they have dedicated tasks when they come to us. At least for a helper in the house, volunteers where they're going to take over a closet and keep it, in good shape or something they have ownership of, or front desk volunteers, which is not flexible. So I like to have those ways to start to understand that. Another thing that I make part of that is communication to them. So we have service standards. Some of you have heard me talk about that. It's a document that kind of guides all staff and volunteers for how we behave in the house and how we navigate gray area situations. And so I make as a part of that conversation, and I preempt it with the core volunteer application, that they go and look at that section of our website and familiarize themselves with it so we can talk about that. But to make sure that they're reading it, I ask what resonates with them from that, because I want to know kind of what's motivating them, because something from that list is always going to motivate them, and make them want to partner with us as opposed to a different organization. So those are some things that we do. And then just our everybody volunteer application, I did want to say, just because you guys haven't said it, we have a waiver picture release. And then we invite everybody to decide who's 18 and older if they'd like to sign up for any of our newsletter segments. So that's another thing that's on our everybody application.
I'll share.
Okay, Vanessa.
Okay, I'll go ahead. We use Volunteer Hub, and so we have lots of different forms, like Stephanie was saying. Like, everyone has the basic, and then we build it up with more questions depending on the program they're applying for. So our core program definitely has, I think there's like 25 fields on there. The one I don't think I heard yet that we ask is your reason for service, and that's super helpful. So I can see if someone needs community service hours, if they need it for a class, if they have a deadline, they can add that in there, and that really helps to direct my response in the conversation and making sure it's going to be a good fit and kind of lead where we should go next from there. So I've really appreciated having that question. But otherwise, the only time I've really looked at the application for like more detail or for editing has actually been spurred on by questions from our development team. As it was mentioned, like, they might ask their employment, like their employer, or how they heard from us. So like our social media manager was asking me those questions, so I could go and tell her specifically what we ask or pull some statistics for those questions. So if you are considering either you're designing an application or you're going to modify or update yours, maybe bring in some of your development team or leadership team in case there's certain things they would want to know moving forward.
I was just going to add one more thing. So I didn't have this on the first application that I was kind of given as I stepped into my position. And now I've tried to update it at least once a year. But the last update, I added their preferred communication outlet. It seems like kind of a no-brainer, but I didn't have it on there. And so I was always reaching out via email, and then I wouldn't hear back from a lot of people. And I also heard from some of our volunteers that they really preferred when I gave them a phone call. And if they're anything like my husband, they were never going to see that email that was in their inbox. So that was a helpful one, just because it allows me to communicate with the volunteers a little bit better.
Do you all have any experience with volunteers who may need court mandated hours?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that's another one that comes to the application, because we also have the section of what brings you to volunteer with us. How did you hear about us? Like, what is your reasoning for becoming a part of our team? And for us, we do require at least 40 hours of service before we really consider those probation hours. We just get a lot of requests from people that need 5 hours or 10 hours. And for our recurring volunteers, obviously that is not really an option to go through the entire onboarding process for a volunteer that you know you're probably going to get 2 or 3 shifts out of and then never see again. So we always, and we say this on the application and during the interview, that for all volunteers, the recurring like core house volunteers, we do require at least 2 shifts a month for at least 6 months. And yeah, if it is court mandated, then we ask for at least 40 hours.
Thank you.
We don't offer court related. We've shifted to not saying court mandated because sometimes someone's doing it preemptively. They know they're going to go to court and they want us to sign off on it. So we just say court related ones we don't do. That was a board decision. I will say, given how often we get phone calls about that, I could spend all of my days writing letters if I didn't have any sort of minimum, if I did say yes to it. So I will say that's the one thing to consider if you're wanting to change your policies at all, is what's going to take a lot of time for you, because always our mission comes first, right? So if all of your time is spent managing that and not other things, it might be a challenge.
We also do not support court related. I love that. I'm going to immediately change that in our application, because I actually was, when I was a house staff member, I had the unfortunate event of having to let a volunteer go due to the fact that just a lot of things were happening, but she was there under the pretenses of court related versus mandated, and that caused a lot of issues. But we do not support that, and so it's written like several different places, one of which is directly on the application. You do have to select yes or no, I'm applying under pretenses of this, and that gives me an automatic, again, I still reach out if they say yes and just explain our policy, but it's an automatic kind of relief from having that issue arise later on.
I do want to say something that I have done, and I don't know that anybody else that I've heard of does this, but maybe you guys are, and so I'm just going to float it out there. But I do keep a list of places in our community that offer that, because I do feel like if they've made a point to reach out to us, you know, they want to do it, and I actually do want our community to be better, and I believe in what community related or court related service can do. So as a result, I do try to keep that so that they know I'm not trying to say like, no, I think you're a terrible person, you shouldn't do it at all. But just a way for me to support them in moving forward and to say, you know, I'm sorry, we can't do it, but here's some other places. So.
Yeah, we actually have that same thing here where we have like a whole community resource guide. So like whether it's like court order hours, which we also can't take here, or if it's just like a donation we can't accept or something like that, so that we can like suggest people onwards to other nonprofits, which is also nice. I will say, going back to like the tabling thing, like being able to connect with other nonprofits there, because then sometimes we'll ask like, oh, do you take these kinds of things? Because we know we can't take them, but we get asked about them a lot. So it's usually super helpful. Like, I don't feel like I ever get someone like upset when I tell them that we couldn't like take like the court ordered hours, as long as I have a suggestion of somewhere where they could go alternatively.
We also do the same thing. We try to send people towards like our beach cleanups and different like kind of easier one-off volunteer opportunities like that. Quick cautionary tale in case this could be the case for anyone else, because we were surprised just how many calls and emails we were getting from specifically court-related volunteer opportunities. And this was actually last year when I had jury duty. I noticed that our local court has RMHC in its list, which is great for when people want to make donations, like our name is prompted, but we realized that it also means that our name prompted when people were sent lists of different local organizations organizations to receive those court volunteer hours. And as far as our knowledge, no one had ever reached out to us from the judicial circuit to see it if we wanted to be on that list. So we were able to remedy that, but just to warn anyone in case that could possibly be the case somewhere else.
That happened to us too.
Yeah, fun times.
This might be a silly question, but does every house, you guys all do background checks as well on the volunteers? And if so, I think what we're having an issue with, and I don't know why, we use Golden and Golden does automatically the background checks for us and our volunteers pay for it, but sometimes they will fail due to a speeding ticket. And then they'll come back as in not eligible to volunteer, and then I have to just kind of override the system, and it's a whole thing. So I just wanted to see if any of you guys run into this issue and how you handle it if you do.
Yeah, I think this is a good segue to skip to our section talking about those background and sex offender checks. So once people fill out the application, you've met with them, we'll jump back and talk about kind of that interview process. What are your guys' different systems for background checks? We use a site called MBI, where we just require the volunteer to sign off an acknowledgement that they're okay with running the background check, and then we send their name and address to this website that sends us back any kind of hits that there might be, including traffic violations. For us, though, the only things that will stop a volunteer from coming on site and being able to join the team are any violent or sexual crimes against children. So we do have that distinction. So we do have people that have been worried that a DUI 15 years ago means they aren't going to be able to volunteer, or even if someone was arrested like on drug charges. So curious also what kind of your guys's specific regulations are on that when you do get the background check back.
So we have 2 layers, as I mentioned. We separate core versus community. We do sex offender checks for community because they're never going anywhere unsupervised. We don't give them keys to anything. We know right where they are. They're in the common areas, which thankfully for us, it's pretty easy for us to see if someone is in a common area versus not a common area. And so that makes it so that we feel a sex offender check is sufficient for us because they really aren't going anywhere that we don't want them to go. However, for our core volunteers, we do a full background check. Our company is JDP, and they're very affordable if you are curious. But they, for our core volunteers who are going to be able to have more access, we trust them with keys. We don't follow them around. They have dedicated roles within the house. Then we do a full background check for them when we're onboarding. So we separate it that way because if we, I told you how many people came last year, right? If we did a full background check on all those people, I would have no budget for anything else. In fact, I'd go well over the budget that I do have. So that's why for us, it's good to have those distinctions.
We do just our own footwork on the background checks, name search into sexual registry and CaseNet as well. But we don't have volunteers 24/7 around the clock here at the house. Eventually that's on, that's my pie in the sky thing for 2025 for sure, to have a fully staffed volunteers, house staffed by volunteers. So, and I heard someone mention I've heard it before about having the volunteers pay for the background check. Does that kind of weed out the volunteers, the ones that are really interested? And do you know how many you get that, do you ever track how many volunteers apply as to the ones that didn't pay for background checks, or why that person did not volunteer because they had to pay for a background check? And Stephanie, what was the name of the website that you used?
Yes, the company that we use is JDP, and they're based out of California. I have the standard package, and I did tell them specifically what I wanted to be included on that, and the version that we use, which could be different than what you choose, but the version that we use is $7 a check. So again, very affordable, but even then, that adds up.
Sorry,
use
go ahead.
that for, I was going to say, we use that for core volunteers, our interns, and committee and board members. I'll get that.
I would say for us, we honestly haven't had any pushback in making volunteers pay for the background check. It is a $20 fee and it renews annually. But I just think with the demographic they're working with, they all completely understand why we have to do it. And I'm making known that we're a non-for-profit, so we just don't have the same resources for-profits do, which is why they unfortunately have to pay for it. But I just think it also shows how much they're willing to be at the house. If they're going to complain to me about a background check, chances are you're probably not going to volunteer 3 times a month like I want you to. So I think it's a good deciding factor for us as well.
I'm really curious if any of you guys have any differences between like the background checks you give, or I guess if you do, but I know like some branches are starting to lean more towards not giving like guest families background checks. And so I know our branch, we still do have our guest families take background checks. And so we'll have like our long-term volunteers take that same background check. And then similar to what Stephanie was saying was like, we have like a shorter version that's just like a national sex offender database check that our group ones do. But yeah, I was just really curious if you guys have the same requirements for volunteers and families, or if it's like different there.
That's something I was going to say, is that we do use the same service for our background check for families and for volunteers, and it's the same requirements as far as being able to stay on site with us. So that kind of helps to offset the cost that a lot of that budget is going into the monthly charge for that service.
I had something to add on a conversation that I think was a little bit further back. But we did not do background checks for volunteers until just about a year ago, when I decided that was something that we needed to prioritize. And so when I was going through and creating our volunteer handbook, I had both a law enforcement officer and a board member who is a lawyer look through it just to make sure that we were covering all of our bases. And so I think somebody had asked about like, what do you exclude and what do you look for? And so something that they had suggested that we add was 2 words, such as. And so that just kind of opened it up so that if there was something that it made it have there a little bit more gray area so that we could just make sure that we were doing what's best for volunteers and for us. And then one other thing to add is just that we have an appeals process. And so if anybody doesn't have an appeals process, I would recommend that, because you never know the circumstances surrounding something. And so our appeals process goes through our CEO so that she can really make the best decision for both the volunteer and for our organization.
One thing I was just going to mention, Alex, is I also don't get very much pushback on paying for our $21 background check. However, I do recognize that we have volunteers that are coming from, universities, for instance. Some of our students are not, like, they're trying to afford the cost of college. So we do have a coupon code, and I would say that the cost of, like, most volunteers pay the cost, so then it more than makes up for that back end cost of giving a coupon code that makes it free for that student.
We use Sterling volunteers for our background checks, and they offer like 3 levels of criminal check, and we have the advanced, so it's like level 2. It's not the highest level, but it searches state and county criminal records, sex offender, government watch list, fairly detailed, but it has the option for volunteers to cover the cost, or else we will pay for it. And if I had to say, I would say maybe it's like 50-50 that volunteers just optionally choose to cover the cost for us, which is awesome when they do. It costs $23 a volunteer for the current level that we're at. And I just wanted to mention that one thing that's been great with that, we have had a number of core volunteers who have joined us who are new residents to the United States. And so they don't have a social security number. And that has been a big question for them or concern about, background checks or opportunities. And so for that level that we're at, that is detailed, it doesn't require a social security number so that they're still able to go through the same process as all of our other volunteers without concern over that.
That's a really good note. Thank you. Since we've shared a bit about background checks and sex offender checks, all great information, I do want to make sure that before we wrap the meeting up here in 20 minutes, that we talk about kind of that actual, not onboarding process as far as training, but that first touch point after you've received someone's application, they're coming into the house. I guess I'll start it there because everyone has different ways to get people into that house for that first tour. For us specifically in Tampa Bay, we have always met one-on-one with volunteers. After they submit their application, we work with them one-on-one over email just to set up a time for them to come in that works for one of our volunteer coordinators. Sometimes we will try to pair volunteers together to save some time and do like 2 or 3 going around on a tour at once. But we really think that that kind of individual one-on-one touch point, serving both as an interview and as the introduction to the house and almost as training because we're walking them around and getting them the lay of the lands, for us has just been the most successful way as far as retention that we've found. But I know lots of chapters do more scheduled group kind of interviews and group house tours. So I'm curious to see the split there.
I do the same thing that you do, Dylan. I correspond with email and then a phone call just to see that they are actually interested in speaking with someone. Then we have them come in, sit down, talk about what our expectations are, what their expectations are, house tour, a little bit of orientation, and then schedule their first shift. And then they come in and they train. It's worked really well. I had a group come in yesterday. Well, a group. It was a father and a daughter, and it was my previous career for 12 years was operations manager, and I hired a lot of paid employees, and I wanted it to be very formal, and I wanted it, dressed to impress, one-on-one. This was my first tandem interview, and my head was spinning. So I have yet to do like a group onboarding, but I am interested in maybe streamlining because I think I can probably deliver the same message to multiple people. But it was just, they were really excited to interview and they almost turned the interview upside down. So I just wonder if anybody has got a certain way of doing group onboarding that or group interviewing.
We do group meet and greets. Oh, I think someone else was going to speak as well if you wanted to.
No, you go ahead. I was going to say the exact same thing.
Okay. Yeah, we do like small groups. So we'll do like up to 8 people, I think. And that's very specific based on the amount of seats we have at one of our houses. But it's a small group. I think it works well for us because we just have a lot of people coming in interested in moving forward with individual volunteering. And our meet and greets are for more than just our like the day-to-day volunteers in the house. It'll also be for like our ambassador volunteers and our family wellness. So like pet therapy, massage therapy, anything in that sort of category. And so we'll have everyone who's interested in that essentially sign up for a meet and greet and then go attend it. And then during the meet and greet, we'll start with like a tour of the house because some people just haven't even been to a house before and they just have a lot of misconceptions. So that helps us a lot with breaking down some of those. And then we'll end it with meeting in one of our common areas. So somewhere with like a TV screen or something like that in it. And we'll go through like a PowerPoint presentation that goes through all of our volunteering opportunities. I'll say we'll get a lot of group volunteers from out of a meet and greet as well, where someone like decides to move forward with it.
Uh-oh, Katie.
For like 3 dinners afterwards. No. Okay.
Sorry, Katie, we can kind of hear you now.
Yeah, I think I might have just cut out a lot. I'm so sorry
No,
about
you're
that.
all right. We can hear you now.
In summary, yes, we do group meet and greets. It's essentially a tour and then a presentation of requirements.
So, Alex, here I actually do both. So I try to prioritize the one-on-one, but during busy times, like at the beginning of semesters for students, then I will do a group one of 3 or 4 people. One time I tried to do it with more than that, and I didn't feel like it was as successful. And so I found that having 3 or 4 is the max that I do, just because it still can feel really interpersonal for us and I get to know them well, but it's still helpful for budgeting my time as best as I can during those busy seasons.
We only do group onboarding. We get a lot of applications, I will say. And then the first step is you have to attend an orientation before even an interview. And most of our orientations, we don't have core volunteers and we don't have different groups of volunteers like some of you mentioned, which I thought was so interesting. But we do have orientations. Most of them are during similar times as most of our volunteer opportunities, because I do want to attract the right candidates. We do orientation once a month. After orientation, there is a 2-part interview process. Somebody has to meet with one of my coordinators. After that, second interview is with me, and then the paperwork. I'd like to say onboarding can take around a month. It's like getting a job at the house, but it really is to roll out those candidates that are not going to be with us for a long time. So yeah, ours is definitely a bit lengthier, and it's definitely always in a group setting, but it's worked really well for us.
I had mentioned that I'm kind of a one-woman show right now at the beginning. So I just we also have 2 houses in our chapter. So meeting one-on-one at the house with the tour is not physically possible for me. Our chapters are like 45 minutes away, except with DC traffic, it becomes 2 hours. So I personally, right now, we're still doing like individual interviews over Teams. And then my goal is to move towards having like 1 or 2 monthly sessions where anybody that's already done their one-on-one with me that month can come see the house. We can go over any final questions they have, and then fulfill the process.
We get a number of applicants as well, and once their application comes through, we start off with a 15-minute intake call, a phone call, and then that's followed by a Zoom interview that the volunteer schedules using Calendly, just because tracking them is really tough sometimes. And then after they get through, if they do well on that Zoom interview, which is about 30 minutes, we invite them to a group orientation at the house. And we offer that twice a month, once on a Thursday evening and then Saturday afternoons. And they get a tour, they get to see, families at the house. The evening tour is really great because they get to see, the dinner procedure and when the house is really full with families. We finish up their paperwork. Everyone has to submit a photo as well. We use Volgistics to store that so we can put a face to the name. We have about 270 or so volunteers. And then they also have to go through a training shift. Their first shift is a training. And then once they complete that, then they are, officially a volunteer if they complete that successfully. And yeah, that seems to work for us. I really have difficulty, like you, Alex, trying to interview 2 people at one time. Sometimes it's a couple that they want to volunteer together. They want to, interview together. They want to do everything together. And we'd rather just talk to them separately.
Lori, I just had a question. Sorry, real quick. When we're talking about interviewing, like we are rebuilding our program, so there's not really a lot of leeway I'm given with turning away volunteers. What does that look like for those of you that are interviewing with like specific things in mind and actually like you do turn away volunteers if their interview doesn't go as well.
So that happened this week, actually. Funny you should ask. Where the volunteer just expressed some thought processes that just really showed her not to be a good fit for our program and to really not grasp, what we're trying to do here and support our mission. So our team will just exchange the information. We'll just talk a bit about, what occurred, on the call or on the interview, and just come to a decision as to whether or not, we're going to give that person a shot to come and volunteer or not. And so in this woman's case, we really can't have her join our program. So we'll just be following up with, in the past, it's been a written letter, just explaining, that we can't offer a position, but here are some other organizations that, she might be able to, contribute her time to. We've done that via email as well. I suspect that she's going to want to, argue over it. So, email or a letter will, that's as far as we'll take it.
I will say, I think this is where us having two different categories of volunteers really helps, because if someone's interested in core volunteering, I always suggest that they do a couple of shifts as a community volunteer first to get a feel for the house, to understand how we run. That way, my suggestion to them is that that's a good way for them to get to know us before they make a long-term commitment to us. And then that way, when we get to the higher level commitment, they come in with a little more information. If they've had a very extremely different idea of what would happen, some of that has been corrected. So that really helps me a lot, having those two different categories. And then it does mean if they are not satisfied as a community volunteer, they're probably not going to be satisfied as a core volunteer, and saves me some time. In terms of onboarding for us, we do have different processes. Again, community volunteers, I've worked really hard with our team, specifically our family services team, because I am a one-person show here too. And so they do orientations for our community volunteers every day. And we do our best to offer a tour if it's your first time, which takes about half an hour to answer questions, see the lay of the land, which is especially helpful if you're going to do sanitizing and tidying where you're going to be throughout the common spaces. And then I have task lists that help us to give them some independence, and we don't have to handhold for those tasks, but there are things that need done every day. So we can talk them through how to read the task list. They've seen all the areas. They know how to use our sanitizing system. So job specific things, I think we can orient any job in about 5 minutes after the tour. So that really helps us. In terms of onboarding our core volunteers, we do have a vetting process. One of the things that I love that I get to do is reference checks, which obviously is not for the purpose of firing or appropriateness, but helps me to know who they are from people who know them really well. And we have a lot better conversation when I get to that. What are your interests and hobbies, and who are you? We do a background check, and then they come in for an in-person interview. So that's when we talk more specifics about their shift. So, but I will say I love having the two different categories because it saved a lot of time and a lot of ability on my part. So,
Stephanie, if I can follow up with a question on that, do you require your core volunteers to do community shifts first, or is that just something you suggest to certain volunteers based on their initial interactions with you?
If I don't know them at all, and if they don't know anybody from our team at all, then I do ask them to do that. If they've come recommended to me, I have a higher comfort level depending on who it is that recommends them, because they know us, right? If it's one of my other core volunteers who recommends them, they know our requirements, they know our community, and so it makes it easier for me to shortcut that a little bit, but usually I require that.
I don't typically turn away volunteers. I more often turn away interns than I do volunteers. But I'm a small house. I'm a there's three of us in the programs, the house programs, and we work pretty closely together. But we're also part-time staffed with 24/7, we call it guest relations services. So any support that they can get, and they're very helpful when admin's not around. So the only thing that won't qualify a volunteer here is commitment of time. Like if their schedule doesn't add up with what our expectations are, if they are, if they're looking for a time block that is already taken by our core volunteers, which is really all we have other than meal providers and our lunch providers. If they pass a background check, there's a pretty good chance. I'm looking at one of my first think tanks. Dylan had mentioned that they actually turn away volunteers, and I couldn't wrap my head around it because we hadn't had our house finished and built yet, and I was only doing lunch volunteers. So I'm hoping, I know that sounds kind of cold, but if I can get to the point where I have enough volunteers where I have to turn volunteers away, that would be kind of nice.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I'll say that, honestly, and this is going to sound cold too, but I'll say we don't turn away as many volunteers as maybe we ought to sometimes. There have been volunteers that during those early interview processes or during that tour, you kind of have an inkling of maybe this person just personality-wise or responsibility-wise, what they're willing to do, tasks in the house isn't a perfect fit, but we're volunteer coordinators, right? Our whole goal is to match people that are passionate about the program and want to volunteer and spend time in the house with the families, make sure that they can find a role that's best for them. So I really agree with what you were saying too, Stephanie, about maybe core volunteer in-house regular commitment isn't a perfect fit. But what we usually do is once folks pass the background check and get through that initial intake process, they're part of the team. If with the house managers and our own like families and us are seeing interactions that maybe this volunteer is not a perfect fit for the house, most of the time, 9 times out of 10, that volunteer is going to realize that pretty quickly, and they're gonna let us know that they're resigning or stepping down. But there have been a few times that we've had to ask people after the fact to consider some of our other volunteer options that maybe aren't consistent in the house. Things like our special events and our meal program and other ways to support the families. We are heading toward 3:30 and we want to be respectful of your guys' time. And I also have to jump into another meeting right after this. So just wanted to say again so much thank you for everyone being here. I personally took a ton out of this conversation. I hope everyone else walks away with at least 1 or 2 new ideas, things that you hadn't considered yet and now get to implement or at least try in your programs. And that really is what this entire think tank is about. So it's been great seeing all of you guys. We hope to see all of you guys at our next meeting, which is on Valentine's Day, actually. It is February 14th. Oh, is that not true? Oh, no, I have the wrong date.
March. It's going to be in March, yes.
That makes a lot more sense.
Yes, yes.
March 14th then. Thank you. I had the date wrong. So everyone can enjoy their Valentine's Day without a think tank. But March 14th, we're going to be discussing a new topic, which again, I have pulled up. We're doing volunteer recognition. So perfect timing as we're heading into April, volunteer recognition month, where everyone's going to be planning their events and ways to appreciate our volunteers. That's going to be what we're talking about March 14th. Thank you for the correction, Stephanie. My apologies. But I am glad that the new time has worked for so many people. It was great seeing all you guys. And at least for me, this was a wonderful way to kind of finish out what has been a very long week. So if anyone had any closing kind of remarks or anything they wanted to add on our topic of volunteer recruitment, but just thank you everyone for your contributions. Stephanie, I'm sure, took wonderful notes. So I'll pass it off to her in a second for ending housekeeping discussion, but make sure to check that Google OneDrive for all of the notes if you want to look back on the wonderful discussion we had.
Yes, and I will say I am capable of lingering for a little bit. So I know Dylan, I want to be respectful of him and not make you late to your next meeting. But if you have other things that you want to kind of problem solve together for a few minutes, I have the ability to linger. But yes, my goal is that today's Friday, so by midweek next week, that I will have all of our notes uploaded to our new Google Drive, and that I will have shared that with all of you. That's one thing I haven't yet gotten done, so I apologize for that, but I'll get that. And we'll also get this video recording uploaded to our YouTube playlist so that you can go back and watch it or any other ones. So I'm really excited about the ways that we're growing because we need to. So thank you all for helping us get to this point. And those of you who are new joining us, that you will help us grow even more, which is really great because that's why we want to exist, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Stephanie. Thank you again, everyone, for being here, and we'll see you next time. Have a great rest of your Friday.
Thanks, Dylan.
Thanks, Dylan. Can I ask a quick question, Stephanie? Do those calendar invites come every month, or like, does it come right before the month, or should I have them all for the whole year?
Yeah, so I did. I was trying to figure that out, in fact, because I tried to send to more than just the January one, and I don't know what happened, but it wouldn't let me. So I don't know if I did something wrong, but we did send, and I don't know if you got this because I think you joined us more recently, right? And you haven't been on our mailing list for very long. I had sent out, I think it was in November, kind of here's the year at a glance. So I will make myself a note to resend that email to you.
That would be wonderful. Thank you so
and
much.
Will you remind me your new last name? I know it starts with an M.
Yes, Melgar. S-M-E-L-G-A-R.
Perfect. I will send that to you, and then that way you can at least bookmark it. And hopefully in short order. Like, it's amazing. I've done lots of Google Meets through my personal email, but not for anything recurring. So I'm learning some things on the recurring front that's not going the way that I thought. So I'm sure I'll figure it out eventually, but it's, every new system, there's the little hiccups that you didn't know you're going to run into.
Well, thank you for coordinating this. It's really great to be a part of it. I was excited when Olivia told me about it.
Yeah, so I'm really glad that you're part of it. It's one of those things that, it's, I love doing it because I've learned so much. And like I said about Lorianne, like, I feel like that's one of my favorite things about being part of RMHC is that there's been such generosity. And when I first reached out to her, it was actually about volunteer recognition, I think was my initial question, that I'd been tasked with understanding what did other chapters do. And I thought there has to be a better way than just like, I randomly think I'm going to call 18 people about this one question, right? Surely we're all having similar questions. And thankfully a lot of people decided to join me in conversation, and I'm really glad about it. So while it was born out of that, my own desire to fill a need, I am really glad that it's grown beyond what I needed in a lot of ways, which is really healthy. So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. Good to see your face and meet you in person too, Stephanie.
Okay. Yes, I'll get you that information as quickly as I can. It'll come from my RMHC address because that's what I sent it from initially. But we're working to transition everything to Gmail from here. So yeah.
Thanks. All right. Have a good weekend.
Yes, you too.
Bye.
Bye.